Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Winter 2021 Climate and Water Update webinar. For those joining us for the first time, welcome. And for anyone who has joined us for our webinars before, welcome back. I've heard we have people tuning in from across the world today, like the Mekong River Commission, so it's really exciting to have you all here today. Before we begin proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Kulin Nations, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. I would also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to traditional owners of the lands that we are gathered on in all states and territories, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. We acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and their contribution they make to Australia. Today, our experts will be giving you an update on temperature, rainfall, and water conditions so far this year, and then we'll turn our attention to the outlook for winter 2021. My name is Jordan. I will be your moderator today. I'm joined by Claire, who will be producing today's webinar. Together, we will help make the webinar as interactive as possible. But before I start, may I ask for your attention as we cover off some housekeeping items. With the current situation as it is in Australia, this webinar will be conducted from our respective homes. Please bear this in mind as we may encounter some technical issues during the broadcast. Our broadcast today will run for 60 minutes with plenty of time allocated for questions. This webinar is also being recorded and the video will be shared with you via email. For first-time webinar attendees, please see some helpful tips on your screen. Most importantly, please note the chat box where you can send through any questions or feedback for the presenters. Please use this and not the Q&A box to send us your questions during the session, and we will answer as many as possible during the allocated breaks. We even have someone named Robert, who's from one of the climate teams here at the Bureau, who's ready to answer your questions as well. It's the speech bubble button on the right-hand side of your screen. The icon will turn blue once it's on. If you want to test out the chat box now, feel free to tell us your name and where you're dialing in from. Thank you to everyone who has sent in questions during the registration process. We've used them to help shape the content you'll see today, and we'll get through as many as we can. And finally, I'm delighted to introduce you to our presenters. From the Bureau, we have Senior Climatologist Catherine Ganter, and from the water sector, Sigrid Thijs. Catherine's focus is reporting on and communicating the current state of the main climate drivers for Australia, as well as monthly and seasonal rainfall and temperature outlooks. Sigrid works in the water section program at the Bureau of Meteorology. She spent 20 years working with and for the water sector and now focuses on Commonwealth water agencies, the Murray-Darling Basin, and irrigated agriculture. Welcome, team. So we have a packed hour for you today, including recent conditions. So we'll be talking about autumn, and we'll also include a flood update. We will look at the winter outlook, and we will see what's driving the winter outlook. But let's not keep you waiting any longer and get straight to Catherine. She'll start us off with a wrap up of the past few months. Don't forget, send us your questions at any time using the chat function, and we'll answer them in the upcoming break. The chat is open right now, so you can send them in. All yours, Catherine.
Thanks, Jordan. So let's start up with the autumn 2021 wrap up. So let's take a look at the numbers for autumn rainfall. So the map here shows blues for above average rainfall, the top 30% of rainfall records if you're a numbers person, and red's below average rainfall, the bottom 30%. So Australia was 3.5% below the long-term average as a whole, so sitting very much in the middle of autumn numbers. Now, while there's a fair amount of variation across the country, no state or territory ranked in their top or bottom 20. However, it was New South Wales's wettest autumn since 2000 and WA's wettest since 2015. We can also see some drier areas across the south in that deeper red colour, with some parts of southeast Australia still waiting on their autumn break. In terms of the tropical cyclone season, we added another 2 tropical cyclones in autumn, Odette and Seroja, to make 8 tropical cyclones in total for the 2021 season. So let's take a look month by month. March saw large areas of Australia with above average rainfall as La Nina was finishing up, and it was the second wettest on record for New South Wales. For April, nationally rainfall was 37% below average. You can see a lot of that light pink colour across the map. and it's almost a complete opposite of the March pattern. And just to illustrate that, after their wet March, April rainfall in New South Wales was then 9th lowest on record, so it's lowest since 2005. South Australia was also drier, having its 7th lowest April rainfall in 122 years, and that was its lowest since 1997. And then in contrast, Queensland was highest since 2010, and you can see that's largely courtesy of the wet conditions in the north. Now, May rainfall in Australia was 39% below average, with the Northern Territory having its 9th driest month. So let's take a look at maximum temperatures for autumn. The yellowy oranges are warmer than average. Like rainfall, that's the top 30%, while the blues show cooler than average autumn days. And Australia was 0.64 degrees warmer than average, but it was still the coolest autumn in about 6 years. And also all states except New South Wales were above average, but ranking outside their warmest 20. So if we look at autumn minimum temperatures, nationally, autumn nights were almost smack bang on average, coming in at 0.02 degrees below average for the country as a whole. New South Wales and Queensland had their coolest autumn nights since 2012, so 9 years. So if it felt a bit chilly, it's been 9 years. Okay, so I'll pass over to Sigrid, who's here specially today to give us a flood and water perspective from autumn. Over to you, Sigrid.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. So the map that you see here is showing the soil moisture deciles for May, and it goes off from what Catherine was saying, that you can see most of the country is showing, especially inland Australia, showing below average soil moisture. So we'll have a look to see what all that means for storage volumes. So to help you interpret this map, the size of the dot is relevant to the size of the storage, while the color of the dot indicates how full the storage is, with the red to yellow shades showing less than half full and green to blue shades showing more than half full. So generally you can see across the country there's lots of blue colors, which means that a lot of our storages are now more than half full, which is something we haven't seen for a while. So we'll go have a look around the country, starting in Northern Australia, where water storage levels are close to or above 80% of accessible capacity at the moment. Then we go to Southeast Queensland, where water storages remain low in certain areas on the west of the Great Dividing Range, and we'll have a closer look at that in a moment. The storage levels, while in the Northern Murray-Darling Basin, they have increased during summer, many are still below 50% full. I'll now take you through a couple of case studies around Australia, starting with Northern Australia. So after 2 poor wet seasons in Australia, groundwater and water storages have now recovered well after the 2020-21 wet season. Under normal conditions, the Darwin River Dam and Lake Argyle storage levels follow a reasonably predictable pattern of filling during the wet season in summer and then draw down during the remainder of the year. However, during the summers of 2018-19 and 2020, the wet season didn't deliver the usually wet conditions. To give you a better picture of just how dry conditions were, the map that you can see on the left is of modelled root zone soil moisture for the top 1 metre of the soil profile for 2019. And it is showing very large parts of very much below average root zone soil moisture, including the lowest on record. So if you want to do a mouse click, please, Catherine. So the chart that you can see now, it shows the groundwater levels in the Tyndall Limestone Aquifer near Katherine. And prior to the 2021 wet season, groundwater levels were the lowest in more than 20 years, as almost no recharge occurred during the 2018-19 and 2019 wet seasons due to the low rainfall that we received during those years. But luckily, this year's monsoon season, which ended in April, has allowed the groundwater levels to increase by 5 meters. And you can see on the right-hand side of the chart how it spikes up, which shows that the groundwater level has recovered back to normal levels. So another mouse click, please. Thank you. So water storage levels in the north have also recovered, as you can see. The top chart on the right-hand side, it shows the water levels for Lake Argyle, and it didn't feel as it usually would have in the 2018, 19 and 2020 wet seasons. And this resulted in the lowest storage levels in almost 30 years by the end of 2020, as you can see in the very low white line on the top chart. But luckily, by the end of this year's monsoon season, Lake Argyle was filled and sits now at just under 80%. So the Darwin River Dam, which is just south of Darwin, as indicated on the little map on the left, it was similar but less severe than Lake Argyle. So normal filling didn't occur for 2 seasons, 2018-19 and 2019-20, and it dropped to its lowest levels in 10 years by late 2020. But due to the above average rainfall of the last monsoon season, it has now filled to above 90%. So it's a good news story for Northern Australia. Next, we'll visit Queensland. So unfortunately, this Queensland case study is not a good news story, as parts of Queensland have suffered from severe rainfall deficiencies now for several years. So while the rainfall of 2021 to date has been average or above in some areas, it has also been below average in others, as is shown by the map on the left of the screen, with the white area showing average, the reddy colours below average rainfall, and the blue colours showing above average rainfall for this year to date, so to the end of May. So the map in the middle of the screen, it shows the long-term rainfall decile map, and it just shows you that the southeast part of Queensland is showing very much below average rainfall for that extended period of time from January 2019 to May 2021. And this explains why the storage levels of some dams in Queensland, including Wivenhoe Dam, as you can see in the top chart, are still very low. And also Bjelke-Petersen's Dam, which is in the bottom chart. So both of these are actually lower than last year, and sitting only currently at 7.2% for Bjelke-Petersen and almost 42% for Wivenhoe. So next we'll have a look at the Murray-Darling Basin. So the map that you can see here on the left of the screen shows the total rainfall that fell from the 18th to the 24th of March this year. The blue and the purple colours show 100 mils or more of rainfall. And as you can see, parts of northern New South Wales received over 100 mils of rain that week. And this led to significant increase in the combined storage levels of the Northern Murray-Darling Basin during that following week. So a very quick response from the rain to the rising level in the water storages, as you can see in the chart on the right-hand side of the screen. And this also, all this rainfall also resulted in a large pulse of water down the Darling-Barker River. So just going back to that storage plot, as you can see, it was only 17% last year and is now sitting at nearly half full, thanks to those great rains in March. So the next slide, thank you, Catherine. So as you may have noticed, I'm referring to the Darling-Barker River. The Barker is a name given to the river by traditional custodians of the land, the Barkindji people. So on the left of the screen, you can see a graph which shows daily river discharge in gigalitres per day and clearly shows the river peaks over about 6 weeks at 4 different locations. It shows how water travelled from the upper catchment of the Darling-Barker River towards the Menindee Lakes, and this caused flooding along the way. The yellow curve, the one with the highest peak, shows the daily river discharge at Walgett, which peaked in early April. The Darling Barker peaked at Burke, the green shape, towards the end of April, and at Tilpa in blue in early May, and at Wilcannia, which is the orange curve, about a week later. So the map on the right shows you where those towns are in relation to the Menindee Lakes. The final flood warning for the Darling Barker at Wilcannia was issued on the 22nd of May, which was 57 days after the rainfall event. So it takes a long time for the water to flow from the catchment area down the floodplain. So the next images will show, these are some satellite images that show the filling of the Menindee Lakes during April and May this year over a period of about 4 weeks. So the images start on the 23rd of April on the left, and they go through to the 18th of May on the right. On that image on the right, I've also put the names of some of the lakes that form part of the system. So the blue colors in the image that actually show the water, and you can see how the image in the bottom left-hand corner grows bigger over time, which is actually Lake Menindee. So a total of more than 2 Sydney harbours of water is now in the Menindee Lakes system, which is over 1,000 gigalitres. The Menindee Lakes are a system of 9 large shallow lakes in far western New South Wales. And this is the first time since 2016 that there has been enough water to open the gates between Lake Pamamaroo, as you can see in the middle on the 18 May picture, and Lake Menindee. I was actually lucky enough to have the opportunity to visit Menindee Lakes a couple of weeks ago, and I've included some images to give you a feel for what it's like. So the black arrow that you can see there is where I was standing when I took the photo. Sorry, the black arrow on the screen here is where I stood to take the photos. Thanks, Catherine.
Just before you get to your slideshow of photos, we are coming up on our first question and answer session. So if you do have a question, get it in now to the chat function so that we can answer it for you. Sorry to interrupt.
Thanks, Jordan. So this first photo here is, these are the gates that allow water to flow from Lake Pamamaroo to Lake Menindee. The next photo is a view from the gates looking to the northwestern part of Lake Menindee. So it's really quite incredible to see how much water was already there a couple of weeks ago. And the next photo is one of the things that struck me while I was visiting the Menindee Lakes was the bird life. And this pelican was kind enough to pose for me long enough to take this beautiful picture. The lakes also form an important habitat for fish breeding, particularly the golden perch. And the lakes are also very important locally for their cultural and environmental value, while also being important for managing water resources across the wider basin, including flows to the lower Darling, into the Murray and into South Australia. Back to you, Jordan.
Thank you so much. I love that photo, the pelican there. I hope that's giving you a good explainer of what's happened in the last few months. And we do have a water expert with us because there's been so much water that's fallen. So this is a great opportunity for you to ask any questions of our experts, either climate or water. So please start sending them in via the chat function now. Click the little speech bubble button on the right-hand taskbar and start sending them through. All right, so we're going to get straight into the questions now. And one has come from Emily, who's echoing a lot of people's thoughts out there. They want to know, what is the outlook for snowfall this winter? Catherine, I'm guessing you'll be the best person to ask for that.
Yes, and so good that I've included it as a slide. We don't actually have a snow outlook as such, but we can say a few things based on what the climate drivers are doing. So it's coming.
Okay, so anybody who's interested in the snow, we will be getting to it with a dedicated slide in a couple of minutes' time. Peter has asked, it was just 2 lots of Sydney Harbour water going down a river. That is amazing. How much rainfall did northern New South Wales get in March? Catherine, I'll get you to start off on that.
I would say Sigrid's probably a bit better place to answer this one, Jordan.
Okay,
No
Sigrid?
worries. Thanks, Catherine. I'll take this one. So we did get a total of 1 to 200 millimetres of rainfall over that week from the 18th to the 24th of March across that northern New South Wales area. And as a comparison, the long-term March median rainfall is about 10 to 50 millimetres for that area. And for the entire year, the long-term median rainfall is between 300 and 600 millimetres for that area, which means that about 1/3 of the average annual rainfall fell in a 1-week period. And so yes, 100 mils of rain, which is the same as 10 centimetres over a large area, caused 2 Sydney harbours of inland flow to reach the Menindee Lakes, which is quite incredible.
That is incredible. Catherine, we have a question from Wes. He wants to know, will La Nina return or leave by December 2021?
That's a good question. So March this year was our final month where we saw noticeable La Nina conditions affecting us, and now things are looking neutral, and I'll get to the bit about what's to come, but generally on the cards is neutral for the months ahead.
Okay. Sigrid, Jenny asks, what's the chance of more water flowing down the Darling River towards the Menindee Lakes?
Oh, thanks, Jordan. That's a good question. So because of the March rains, the upper catchment area and the riverbed and the floodplains are now wetted up. And this means that any rain that falls in the right place is likely to produce runoff. It's a bit like a sponge in a way. So when it's dry, it absorbs the water and it doesn't let any water out. But once it's saturated, like the landscape is at the moment, then water will run through it. So our 3-month outlooks, which Catherine will get to a bit later, show around a 70% chance of above average rainfall in northern New South Wales. So with a bit of luck, we might get some rain producing some runoff yet.
Okay, good. Ross has asked, why did most of Southeast Queensland miss out on summer rains? There seem to be a few in any general rain influences. There seem to be few, if any, general rain influences, only bands of storms producing patchy rain. Why was that?
Oh, that's a good question. We have been asked a bit about what happened in Southeast Queensland because it's one key area that missed out on summer rain courtesy of La Nina. Just firstly, there's no two La Nina events are ever exactly the same, even if overall they appear pretty similar. Also, La Nina is not the only factor that affects Australian weather and climate over a summer. And what happened in 2021, there are a few things going on. We saw unusually slow movement of the Madden-Julian oscillations that drives tropical weather up north. And what happened in November is that it sat for long periods of time near Africa and meant that Australia's rainfall in November was rather dry for most areas. And unfortunately, that dry November meant that parts of Australia, the parts of Australia that had only average summer rain did not really get enough wet days to recover. And especially when February also was drier for that southeast region. But there is also one other thing that may have been an influence in this summer. There's also our long-term rainfall trend, which typically shows less rainfall is occurring across southeast Queensland. So it's a bit of a few factors going on for southeast Queensland.
Okay, and Angela has asked, were these rains a part of La Nina? And if so, are we expecting more rains from La Nina?
I assume that's the March rainfall that she's probably referring to.
Yeah, let's go with that.
So there was definitely a La Nina influence in March, but it was waning. So there would be some influence from La Nina. but I haven't looked in great detail as to whether there were other factors at that point in time.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're going to move on to the next part. Thank you for all your questions, and please keep them coming in. We'll have more opportunities to get them answered after we hear from Catherine with the Winter Climate Outlook.
Thanks, Jordan. I apologise, we have a little bit of screaming in the background, so I'm hoping that it's not coming through.
No, we can hear you loud and clear.
Now I think this is Sigrid first, is it?
We had prepared, there was a question that was sent in during the week, so I might just answer that. And it was about where you can find some interesting information to create sort of different types of charts. And so I was going to show how, for example, I created one of the charts that's in the slide pack today. So I can run through that if you like, Jordan.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so on our website, we have loads of information available. And so if you go to the home page and you scroll down a little bit, you get to what you can see here on the screen on the left-hand side, and you can click on water information. And then you get something that looks like what you can see on your screen here now. And then under the water data column, in the bottom is water data online, and you can click there. Then you get to this view, and from this view, basically you can search for area, and as an example, I've put in Bourke, and then you can click on one of the green pins that comes up. And then you get a screen that looks like this, where you have the opportunity to choose which parameter you want. So you can choose water course discharge or water course level, storage volume or storage level, EC, which is a measure of salinity, water temperature, pH, which is for acidity, and turbidity of the water. So you can choose which parameter you want. You can choose whether you want it for 6 months or 1 year or 1 day. And then you can download that data, bring it into your Excel and start playing. And then you can create lots of pretty pictures that way. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sigrid. That looks really cool. I'm going to have a play after the webinar. All right. So I will get started on the winter outlook. Now, here's our latest winter rainfall outlook. This map has just been released, so this is fresh off the press. The greeny blues indicate above median rainfall likely for winter, and the yellowy browns indicate below median. So we can see above average winter rainfall is likely for most of the Australian mainland, with parts of Western WA and southern Tasmania likely to be drier than average. Now, I just wanted to point out that darkest blue colour indicates a greater than 80% chance of being wetter than average, and we say it's very likely at that level. But just to bear in mind, Northern Australia is currently in its dry season, so this means not very much rainfall is needed to exceed the median there. So while we see a lot of dark blue on the map, it doesn't necessarily mean a lot of rainfall is likely to occur. It just says above average rainfall is very likely. And I should add, for those of you who are new, or if any maps don't make sense, please do ask in the chat and we can expand on the maps if need be. So if we take a look at the June and July rainfall outlooks individually, we can see that the bulk of the winter signal is coming from June. And we also see parts of Tasmania are also likely to be wetter during that month. In July, the wetter signal is still present, but slightly weaker. So if we take a look at temperature, here's our outlook for winter, with reds indicating above median rainfall, and the blues indicating below median temperatures. The map on the left shows above average winter maximum temperatures are likely for the tropical north, the southwest and southeast Australia, including Tasmania, while central parts of the country are likely to have below median maximum temperatures. On the right, pretty much all of our country is likely to have above average winter minimum temperatures. And like rainfall, most of the country has that greater than 80% deep red colour, so we say very likely. So let's take a quick look at stream flow. The stream flow forecast shows high and near median stream flows are likely for most locations for May to July, with some low flows in the southwest and southeast parts of the country. The next seasonal forecast, which is for winter, will be issued on the 9th of June. So keep an eye out if you're keen to see stream flow updates. Now, winter coincides with the dry season up in Northern Australia, and that marks the start of their bushfire season. So the latest seasonal bushfire outlook from the Bushfire National Hazards CRC is especially relevant to those areas in the north. The Northern Territory received above average rainfall during the wet season, particularly during December to February. Some of you might recall we had our third wettest December in the summer in our previous webinar. So as a result, the area is now seeing significant fuel growth, root moisture and grass curing, which is resulting in above normal fire potential in some of those northern areas from July onwards. So that's that red area up near Darwin. And normal bushfire potential for this time of year is expected for the rest of Australia. So if you're, say, in Victoria, you know, not very much is happening. So you can find the outlook on the Bushfire and Natural Hazards CRC website if you wish to have a bit of a closer look. So what's driving the climate and these outlooks? If we look at the expected sea surface temperatures for winter, to our west, the Eastern Indian Ocean is looking pretty warm, and while to our east, the tropical Pacific Ocean is looking pretty close to average, so in that sort of grey, greeny colour. So with those tropical Pacific waters looking pretty average, the El Nino Southern Oscillation is neutral, with neutral ENSO likely to continue for winter and into spring. And those maps that you see there on the right show the average of the international model outlooks, and they're all the way out to October. They're all very close to zero, so the outlooks are very neutral. So at this point, there's a very low chance of La Nina returning. So we're also at the time of year now when the Indian Ocean Dipole, or IOD, may influence our climate. Models are suggesting that the Indian Ocean Dipole is likely to be neutral for the first half of winter. However, 2 of the 5 models that we look at suggest a negative IOD may develop during winter or spring. You can see, for instance, at the top there, it's the Bureau model that thinks first. And so we're watching this pretty closely at the moment for 2 reasons. Model accuracy for the IOD improves during winter, and also our last 2 weekly values have been negative. So we may see some changes afoot in the coming few weeks. So what is a negative IOD and what does that mean for us? So if the IOD develops, what essentially happens is we get a feedback loop in the tropical Indian Ocean, with warmer waters pushing to the east, increasing cloudiness and rainfall across the eastern Indian Ocean and over Australia, with cooler waters in the west near the Horn of Africa. And you might hear sometimes about drought in Africa, and the negative IOD can influence that. Historically, a negative IOD has brought above average winter-spring rainfall to large parts of southern Australia, and it can mean cooler days in the south and warmer nights in the north. So to sum up our climate drivers, ENSO is neutral until at least October. The Indian Ocean dipole is currently neutral, but there are some signs afoot for a negative IOD, so we're keeping a close eye on it. And lastly, the other thing we can't forget is that we also have the long-term warming trend as an influence in our climate outlooks. So before I finish up this section, as mentioned, there were quite a few pre-webinar and in-webinar queries about the snow season. Australia's snow season is highly variable, and a single weather event can substantially change a season. And we don't release a seasonal snow outlook as such, but we can look at the climate drivers and how they influence the season. Now, just bear with me on these plots. On the left, we have a plot on how ENSO influences snow depth. And that starts, it's a weekly plot from July through to the first week of October. And the red line is El Nino, the blue is La Nina, and the black is neutral ENSO. And so historically, neutral conditions have favoured deeper snow depths than El Nino or La Nina. La Nina is a bit trickier because of the long-term warming trend. On the right here, we have the IOD one, and you can see a bit more clearly the difference between positive, neutral, and negative IOD. And that negative IOD favours above average snow depths too, but it also has a bit of a complication with the long-term warming trend, whether precipitation falls as rain or snow towards the end of the season. So please remember this is just a guide, and that climate drivers can't guarantee us a good or poor season, but we do have favourable climate drivers at the moment for snow depth this season. And if you wish to have a listen, there's a snow video that was put on the Bureau's YouTube channel on Monday, and I've put the link in the slide pack at the bottom. Okay, so I'll pass back to Sigrid to tell us about the Murray-Darling Basin Water Information Portal.
Thank you, Catherine. I just wanted to introduce the Murray-Darling Basin Water Information Portal. There's a lot of water information available and more being generated as we speak about the Murray-Darling Basin. So the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, Geoscience Australia, the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment, and the Basin States agencies, together with the Bureau, are developing a central place to access information about water in the basin. So the first version will be launched at the end of June, and it'll be quite simple. Our approach is to put out a basic version early in the design process to allow users to test it and tell us what they like and what they don't like and what they would like to see added. And then that feedback will be used to design the next version and so on. This will ensure that we provide a portal that users want and can use to get the information that they need. So the fifth and final version will be launched in late 2023. So we would love for everyone to contribute to the development of this portal, and you can register your interest to participate in either a one-on-one or a group feedback session. So please email water@bom.gov.au, which is on the screen, to register your interest, and somebody from my team will be in touch with you. We hope you'll help us develop a great portal. Thanks.
Great. That looks really interesting. Hopefully, they've given you a ton of information that will set you up for the next few months. And just a reminder that there is heaps of information on the Bureau's Facebook page about the snow conditions. So make sure you jump onto it, and that's where you can see that video that Catherine mentioned. So we've got heaps of questions coming in, but still plenty of time to take as many as we can get to. So please keep sending them in. It's the little speech bubble button on the right-hand side of your taskbar. Click that, it'll glow blue. That's how you know that you're talking to us. Anthony has sent in a question saying, hi, is this soil dryness decile, similar to the soil dryness index? Who wants to take that one?
I don't know the answer to that, so I don't know if you do, Sigrid.
I'm not sure what is meant by the index, so I can't answer that question either. I'm sorry. So maybe if you want to send that question to water@bom.gov.au and explain what you mean by the index, then we can certainly try to answer that question.
Okay. Catherine has got a great. Sorry. This is a great question for you, Catherine. David has sent. Can you please comment on the potential impact of SAM in winter?
So SAM's always a tricky one because unfortunately we only have about 2 or 3 weeks of forecast skill. But I did happen to look before the webinar in case anyone asked, and so the past week or two has been negative SAM, and negative SAM basically means that cold fronts tend to be further north, and so we get more frontal systems crossing over southern Australia. However, the forecast for the coming fortnight shows that we're now back to a neutral SAM, so there's not really any influence from SAM for the coming few weeks.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Sylvia has sent in a message saying the western top end of the NT seemed to have much reduced cyclone activity in the wet season. Is there a known reason for this?
I was unaware of that. I mean, the tricky bit about cyclone activity is that you know, they can occur anywhere across northern Australia, and this season we had 8 tropical cyclones, but we had quite a few tropical lows. So I would assume that it's probably I assume this is related to the bushfire outlook and the increased fuel load there. So I'm not really sure specifically about that region, but those up in the top end had said there was a lot of fuel growth in that area.
Okay. Just revisiting a question that you jumped on before about SAM, how can you follow SAM information in real time?
We actually, in the last few months, have started including it in our, it used to be known as the ENSO wrap-up, and it's now called the Climate Driver Update because we now have a lot more climate driver information. So I might ask if someone can share the Climate Driver Update link with the audience, and you can find it in one of the tabs on that page.
Great. Yeah, it will be in the final section of the email, of the presentation, and that presentation is going to be emailed to everybody. So those links will be available when you're ready. Ian has sent us a message. He says, a general question about climate drivers. When you separate out 2 drivers, as you did for snow depth, how can you interpret a combined driver impact? That sounds like a tricky one, Catherine.
I mean, I guess, yeah, that's really hard to do. So those plots that were shown you might have noticed that they have shading around them, and that's partly to incorporate the fact that other factors are going on when you're looking at the climate drivers. So I might just go back to the slide because it's only one or two before.
Yep.
So we can see here, for instance, let's take El Nino, for example. You can see that pink shading around the red line. So the person that drew up these plots, she added in some uncertainty in uncertainty. That's such a science term, I shouldn't use it. She added in the factor that there might be other things going on. So you can see that even when you take into account other things going on, that generally El Nino years tend to be lower, and then but you can see that in the La Nina shading things tend to be higher. So it sort of takes into account that I'll use uncertainty again. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is SAM and the Indian Ocean dipole tend to have a clearer influence, whereas ENSO, you can see that neutral and La Nina tend to be a bit more closely aligned.
David has asked on that, and just for clarity, how likely is the return of La Nina now that modeling supports a potential negative IOD?
So in terms of La Nina returning, now the La Nina and the negative Indian Ocean dipole are often linked together. They tend to they can occur together and seem to influence each other. But at this point, I've just lost. Am I still online?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I've just lost content. I'm sorry. How do I get content back?
As you can see. Sorry?
I've just lost content, but remind me, what was the question I was answering?
So while you navigate one of the messiest desktops I've ever seen.
Yes, I'm sorry.
David has asked, how likely is the return of La Nina now that modeling supports a potential negative IOD? Right,
thank you. I know I've now worked out what's going on. So negative IOD and La Nina tend to occur together, but forecasts typically are showing that, forecasts are showing that we have a neutral ENSO ahead, and so this year, for whatever reason, neutral IOD is on the cards, and I'm sorry that flustered me.
No, that's totally fine.
But,
I understand.
They often occur together, but this year the forecasts are for negative IOD and neutral ENSO.
Okay, great. So while you keep getting those slides together, and hopefully you'll be able to get them up soon. I know it's a little bit difficult right now, and I apologize to our audience for losing those slides, but it shouldn't be too long, and we'll have them back up and be able to tell you a little bit more about what's going on and what our next webinar is. Leon has asked, are the high pressure systems in the right place and strength for this time of year?
Sorry, Jordan, can you ask that question again?
I'll actually might defer that question because I realized it is a question for you. So we might jump back over to Sigrid. Sigrid, you're there? Everything's fine?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay. When we were doing the practice, we talked a little bit about the Sydney Harbour Bridge, Sydney Harbour being a unit of measure.
Yep.
Can you just break that down a little bit of how big that actually is? Because I think you said something about the amount of swimming pools that were in there, and it was an amazing stat to me.
That's right. So I started off by saying a cubic meter, which most people can sort of imagine, which is 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. That's 1,000 litres.
Okay.
And an Olympic swimming pool is 2.5 megalitres, which is 2.5 million litres. So it's a bit hard to sort of, if you can still bear with me. So if you have 400 of those, it is a gigalitre. And a gigalitre is a billion litres. And 500 of those is a Sydney Harbour.
Wow.
I don't know if you can still follow. And then
It's
2 Sydney Harbours is what is currently in the Menindee Lake system. So
it's kind of like when somebody tells me like this is how many, you know, worlds exist in the sun. It's
bit like
almost
that.
too big to imagine. It's just crazy. Anyway, we'll get back to this question from Leon. Sorry about the technical issues that we had. It's just how it happens. But we've got Leon asking a question that I think will be perfect for you, Catherine. Are the high pressure systems in the right place and strength for this time of year?
I actually haven't looked at that, but the southern annular mode tends to be tied in with high pressure systems and low, and the way that frontal systems go beneath it. And at the moment, as mentioned, Sam is returned to neutral, which means that the systems are generally at where we would expect them.
Okay, excellent. And Dave has asked, in terms of frost risk for early spring, can above average medium temperature forecast for June/July be considered as a lead indicator for warmer minimum temps in early spring?
We actually have a July to September outlook, and that also was looking fairly similar to the winter outlook. Yeah, so sorry, I was just looking at the map, and they're also for July to September, overnight temperatures are also looking warmer.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's all the time we have for our questions today. But if you joined us late, Catherine, can you give us a quick summary of what we went through and where we can find more information?
Sure can. So above average winter rainfall is likely for many areas. And just to note again that Northern Australia is in its dry season, so those totals may not be big. Warmer winter days are likely for the tropical north, southwest and southeast Australia, but cooler for those central areas. Warmer winter nights are very likely. And also, as mentioned in the question, also for July to September. And high and near median stream flows are likely for May to July 2021. And in terms of our climate drivers, we've got neutral ENSO, and there are some signs of a negative IOD, but it's very tentative at this point, so we're keeping a close eye on it. So if you'd like to get further information, there is so much out there, and we've put some links here for you to have a closer look. And I'll pass back to you now, Jordan.
Thank you. And all those links, they will be available on the PPT that we send out with the presentation. So if you've got, if you want to click on any of those, there will be one sent with the email along with the recording. If you'd like to get more Bureau information on your favorite platform, why not connect with us on social media, our blog, or our excellent BOM weather app. And you can subscribe to receive updates direct to your inbox from the Bureau about everything Catherine and Sigrid have talked about today, or information on upcoming webinars. Speaking of upcoming webinars, we received a question today from Lachlan saying, as a 47-year-old man, how can I realize my lifelong dream of switching careers and becoming a meteorologist? Well, Lachlan, you're actually in luck because that is the theme of our next webinar. If you love the weather as much as the Bureau, then why not come join us? Our next webinar is an information session for the Graduate Diploma in Meteorology. You can follow in our presenters' footsteps and forge a career with the Bureau. Hear from coordinators, meteorologists, and past students. The link is in the chat or visit bom.gov.au/webinars to register. Well, that brings us to the end of our webinar today. For questions we didn't get to, please email helpdesk.climate@bom.gov.au. A big thank you to Catherine and Sigrid. We appreciate your time in developing the content and sharing your knowledge with us. And Robert, who answered questions in the background today, your help was very much appreciated. And to you, thank you for tuning in and joining us today. We do hope you enjoyed the session, and we do hope you'll join us again next time. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please use the hashtag #BOMWebinars in your social posts. As mentioned earlier, this session has been recorded, and we will have the video ready for you soon, so watch your inbox. And finally, but most importantly, we want your feedback. It is our aim to bring you the highest quality webinars, but we can't do that unless you share your experience with us. So once we close this webinar, a short survey will pop up on your screen, and we'd be very grateful if you could complete that anonymously for us. Once again, thank you for your time. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye.